Right now, the will of two countries is being tested, the United States and Israel. Tested not just on military capability, but on something deeper. Whether the values these countries were built on are strong enough to absorb real economic pain in order to confront a strategic threat, a threat to themselves and to the world. Because over the past few hours, that test has once again become very real. In the Gulf of Oman, a U.S. guided missile destroyer fired on an Iranian vessel, disabling it, and then sending in Marines to seize control. This was not a warning, it was enforcement. At the same time, now Iran is rejecting talks, calling the U.S. demands unreasonable. And at the center of all of this is the Strait of Hormuz, as we know where roughly 20% of the world's oil flows. Now, most people are not following the details in the Middle East, but they are feeling it. They're feeling it at the gas pump. Before the war, gas in the United States was under $3. Now it's over $4. And U.S. officials are already saying this could last months. So you know what? It really comes down to a simple question. Is Israel and the West willing to pay the price? To unpack this, I'm joined by my friend David Magerman. David spent over 2 decades at Renaissance Technologies, one of the most successful hedge funds in history. He's a doctor of computer science and a well-known investor and philanthropist. But in recent years, David has stepped beyond markets and data-driven analysis into something deeper, questions of identity and purpose, both on a personal level and on a national one. David, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I'm glad that you're in Israel during this time. How's it feel to be here?
Amazing. My last 2 trips were canceled, and so I keep booking new trips and finally got myself in the country. So
isn't this place that we're supposed to leave because there's a war going on?
Never. This is home.
This is home. You know, David, something you wrote caught my eye just a week ago, and I want to put in the context of what's happening. As I mentioned, right now, we see, of course, with no great surprise, that Iran tried breaking the blockade of the U.S. and U.S. enforced, and we have Marines that boarded a ship, and gas prices are going to continue to go up, as the U.S. said. And I know you and I have spoken about this a bit on camera, but off of camera, but you wrote something the other week that really caught my eye. And, you know, you had paid attention to these anti-Semitic kind of memes that have come out that say that the Jews are responsible for rising gas prices. And my initial reaction was to defend this. And I saw it in an Ohio gas station. There was a sign next to the pump that said, Jews did this. And so, you know, I and others have been, no, you know, it's not just our fault. But your article said, yes, we did.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what we did.
So I think that the mistake that we've made in Western society is that we think that we're a society of an economy. We're a financial society, and everything is about money, and everything is about our livelihood, our material livelihood, and making more money is considered success. And, you know, Hashem created a society of human beings, of animals and human beings at the top of the chain, and, you know, Jews with a godly soul, you know, having an extra responsibility for taking care of the world. But we're a society of people, and we're supposed to care for each other, not for our bank accounts. And what we've been dealing with Iran and with the oil industry and with OPEC is that we have been held hostage by the threat of rising gas prices, which brings the cost of all goods up and creates this inflationary environment and creates a challenge to our short-term livelihood. And we've allowed evil to drive that blackmail and to succeed in blackmailing us. And what we've chosen to do with both the Trump administration and the Netanyahu administration is we've agreed to cause gas prices to go up in the short run to achieve a good, to create a good outcome in the world, good meaning between good and evil. And the willingness to do that, I think, is incredibly brave, but also it shouldn't be brave. The idea that we have to be brave to defeat evil simply to avoid losing a little bit of money is, I think, what's broken about Western society. And I think Israel is at the center, and the Jews are at the center of finally changing that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You know, the gut reaction, I think, of most people was to step away from it. You're stepping towards it, and you're talking about the idea that we should be willing to do this. Look,
we should be proud of doing it.
We should be proud. Also in America, meaning in Israel, we have to be proud because we're also, the missiles are coming down. Does the average American, how do we explain to them that you need to be proud to do this?
We don't need to. This, I think, is the false premise of the PR war, that we don't have to convince people that we're good. We just have to be good. And we don't have to convince people that we're great. We just have to be great. And I think by trying to convince people of it, it actually diminishes the argument. We just need to do what's right. And if we do what's right and Hashem helps us succeed, and we start doing good in the world, if we can defeat Iran and break the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and free up oil in the future, in the long run, we don't have to tell people that it's good. They will experience the good of it over time. And eventually, as we do more of these good things, these brave things, people will stop fighting us because they will recognize that we are a force of good in the world. But when we try to convince them of it in real time, before we've seen the benefit of it, we just look like we're apologizing for ourselves.
It's amazing. It looks like Iran, even before this most recent conflict, you could see the now deceased, thank God, Ayatollah Khamenei, that he was saying, America is decrepit, has no moral value, right? He was making all these comments, and I'm listening to you and I'm hearing, well, he must have thought there's no way America is going to have the moral fortitude in order to pay this price.
And I'm not sure that America did. I think, Israel, we have the self-perception that we need America and that the alliance is unbalanced. It is in the other direction. America needs Israel more than Israel needs America. And America is aligning with Israel. We cleared the airspace before America came in and bombed the nuclear facilities. We have had an unblemished record in our airstrikes, in our Air Force, in fighting Iran. We're I would venture to say, the most formidable army in the world right now. And America is benefiting by aligning with us. And I don't think that it's because they're moral and they see the morality of what we're doing. I think they want to join a winner. And Trump even just said that the other day. He said that Israel is strong and Israel is a winner, and they're happy. America's happy to be aligned with us. It's not the other way around. So I think that America can be moral or not be moral. That's not my issue. My issue is that Israel needs to be a moral country, needs to do what's right for Hashem. And we need to follow through on what Hashem demanded of us when he gave us Israel, which is that we make the land holy and be a holy people. And I think that's what we're starting to do now.
David, hearing you speak, it brings, first of all, the clearness and the clarity of the way that you see this in the I would say our faith, and putting that into use, right? It's something oftentimes people go to synagogue, they might go to church, they might go to the and it's separate from our actions. You see this as a whole, and I know this from having spoken to you. Now, your background, you were you have a tech background before people even knew to call that a tech background. I mean, tell me a little bit about where you came from and our audience. And would you have said this at the beginning of your journey when you were 18 years old or whatever else?
No, actually, when you mentioned that, when I was in high school, I went to Alexander Muss High School in Israel in 1985, came to Israel for 10 weeks, and God spoke to me. And I was a secular Jew in an unobservant conservative house, bar mitzvah, but I only knew the letters of Hebrew. I didn't know what any words meant. And I came to Israel, and the first time I overlooked Mount Scopus, overlooked Jerusalem, God spoke to me and told me, you need to keep Torah, you need to keep mitzvot, you need to be a good Jew. And I didn't know what to do with it. And over the next few months, I tried to process it, and I ended up failing, and it went away, went back into remission, and it only revived itself later in life. But I was brought up in the religion of academic accomplishment. My father was a taxi driver. I was, grew up in not poverty, but certainly lower middle class. And I wanted to achieve a better economic outcome for myself through academic achievement, through striving for success, work ethic. And I achieved that. I got a PhD from Stanford. I was building language models back in the early 90s for my PhD work before people knew what they were. And then realized that I was too early in the research I was doing. The mathematical models actually were very similar back then to what they are today. It's just we didn't have the data or the computing power. So I shifted to quantitative trading just because friends of mine who I work with at IBM doing research joined Renaissance Technologies. And I spent the better part of my adult life, 20 some odd years, writing software, building software systems, and optimizing trading algorithms for this very successful hedge fund, working with people a lot smarter than me, but I was more effective than them at building, at the engineering part of developing systems. And I learned the value of money, and I also learned the downside of money. That you have a lot of responsibility when you have a lot of wealth, and I was not handling that part of it well. I didn't have a worldview or values commensurate with my wealth, and as I started giving money away and spending money to some degree, I wasn't doing it well, and I felt like I wasn't sending the message to my children. I had 2 young children at the time, and I wasn't living a life that I thought I could pass on to them. I say that I felt like I was living the life of whoever dies with the most toys wins. And whether I believe that or not, I didn't want to pass that on down to my children. And so I decided to seek out something better, deeper. And I happened to have, not coincidentally, because Hashem guided me through all of this, my cousin in Israel was having a family simcha, and I came to Israel and saw what a Torah-infused life looked like. And while I didn't feel like I knew how to connect to it, I knew I loved it. And
what did you love? Like, what did you see?
I loved the sense of love between community members. My cousin lived in this community. He was kind of at the center of it, kind of the mayor of his little shtibel, and he had friends and extended family, and they just loved each other. And they were there to celebrate his son's bar mitzvah with glee, with joy, with deep joy. And also, I saw that there were these kids at the table. We had conversations, and the conversations were all around Torah. And these 10-year-olds knew more than I did. And, I was not used to being the dumbest guy in the room. And I felt like a lacking that, not that I studied Torah, so why should I feel bad I didn't know it, but it's my heritage. I'm a Jew. This is Torah. And I felt like I should be in the conversation. And that dissatisfaction with myself led me to contact an organization called Partners in Torah when I came back to America, start learning every week with a great chavrusa named Daniel Altman, a lawyer from Teaneck. And over the course of 7 years, I went from just trying it on for size to see what it would be like to get exposed to Orthodox Judaism. Sometime over the course of the 7 years, I became a Reform Yid. I became a Torah, I didn't become a Torah observant Jew yet, but I became someone who believed I should be a Torah observant Jew, and then spent the next few years figuring out how to incorporate that into my family life. I had to move to a new neighborhood because I wasn't within an Eruv. I wasn't walking distance from a shul. My wife was very happy with where we were, and I had to convince my whole family to uproot themselves just to move 10 miles away. But that was a big community change, and thank God my kids are all different in different ways, in their own way, all on board with it. And my wife as well has been very supportive of my change. But I went from being I went from being the guy who worked on Yom Kippur but didn't eat, to being someone who values Yom Kippur as one of the most important and most joyous days of the year. And that was a really big transition for me.
What did the guys at Renaissance have to say about this? I mean, you still went to work in the morning. Like, did that affect your work?
No, I mean, so this happened while I was in transition. I moved. It started when I was working in the office in New York. Eventually, I actually stepped away from Renaissance for 2 years, and then moved to Philadelphia, and then rejoined the company working remotely. So most of this transition happened when I was out of the site and conversation with everybody that was there. But when I started doing it and I started learning Torah, a few of the Jewish members of the Renaissance technical staff, one of them especially, basically told me he thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever done, and really deeply criticized me in very harsh terms for the stupidity and ignorance and even borderline evil of taking on a Torah perspective and a Torah life. And my mentor, who is not Jewish, but I looked up to very highly, also thought that it was, I think the word he used was moronic.
Why is that? I mean, if you told them you were going to meditate in India, would they say?
Oh, they would think that was high praise. Or they would praise that. No, it's because people have this misconception that Torah is somehow anti-science, and that the scientific method is incompatible with belief in the spiritual world, a higher power, something beyond the physics of the world. They don't understand that the physics of the world is Torah, that the natural world is, and all of the mathematics of it, is one of the major miracles God used to create the universe, and that the more that we learn about science, the more compatible it becomes with mystical understanding. I attended this Chabad lecture years ago at a JLI retreat, where there was a physicist who became Baal Tshuva, who was studying quantum physics and black holes and dark energy, dark matter. And he said that the ancient writings of the mystics of the Dark Ages and before actually were accurately portraying what they were only in the 20th century and 21st century discovering about quantum physics and dark matter, and the mathematics of it aligned with what the rabbis were saying 1,500 years ago about Jewish mysticism. And so I think that we go from thinking that science is advancing our understanding of the world to understanding that when science and Torah disagree, it's because science has not advanced enough yet. And we should still follow science. We have to, God gave us brains to understand the world, and we should study it until we understand it more completely. But we should always understand that Hashem knows the world better than we do because he created it. And the Torah is Hashem. So the Torah is, by definition, more accurate than science. And we can live using Newton until we realize that he was wrong and Einstein was right, and maybe Einstein was wrong and Hawking was right. But we have to observe Torah according to what the rabbis say and what the oral tradition says and what God says until they line up together.
Is anyone out there in the technical space and the science space holding where you're holding, seeing these two worlds come together?
Sure. I mean, I've read people who write about it. It tends to be the ones that are most often published are the most controversial ones who are writing about it because they want to be controversial. And I think that's generally true about anything. I don't, no offense, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't read the news. I don't follow any mainstream media at all. I don't even read modern books. Also, I apologize. Because I feel like for the most part, anyone who is taking the energy and the money and the time to publish a podcast, to write articles, to even write books, for the most part, are doing it to convince me of something that's probably not true. And they have to write about it to convince me of it, as opposed to me just experiencing the world and coming to it on my own. And I find that even though I'm one of the most uninformed people that I know more about the world than most people because I don't get misinformed by the disinformation. And so by not reading the news, I know I have more information than people who read the news who have negative information from having consumed mainstream media.
That's amazing. So you're like the hermit on the hilltop.
I live my life on it.
Sees the truth.
I live my life on a need to know basis, and things that I need to know, I can, because I'm blessed, with my wealth and my connections. I can actually just speak to someone. I can speak to you and find out what's going on. I don't need to read 14 people's publications and figure out which ones are true. I can speak to politicians. I can speak to military leaders. I mean, I'm blessed to have that access, but I find that is a much better conduit of learning what I need to know. And if I don't know someone who can tell me about something, it's probably because I don't need to know it. And I live a happier life for that.
Drawing from that is you also made a number of comments. Some I heard on a podcast you do with Michael Eisenberg, which I would encourage also everybody to listen to. I thought it was brilliant, where you spoke about AI, and you spoke about AI in terms that were, I think it just flew in the face of what everyone else is speaking about, including my own family, which is we're all going to become redundant. AI is taking over the world, and tomorrow we're going to be in an AI universe. And use this term, I know you called it a Ponzi scheme or however you did it. Can you give us some insight into how you see this? And would you have seen this if you were listening to the podcasts and the media and everything else?
I mean, I've been doing AI research for my entire adult life, probably 35 years. And I've seen the cycles, and I also studied the field to get my PhD, so I know the AI world from before I was born. AI has been 100 years in the making. This is not something that happened in the last 10 years. And the cycle of AI introduced in the world is that the AI algorithms that have come out have always been most powerful in performance on demo day. Because if they could be made better, they would have delayed demo day. The scientists behind these products just want to put out the most impressive display of the appearance of intelligence But these algorithms so far, I mean, it could be that we'll come up with something with quantum entanglement and other kinds of advanced computing techniques that maybe we can come up with something new. But what we have today is just intelligent pattern matching. I view it as these large language models are the worst database storage system in history. They just memorize their training data in hundreds of times over in different patterns to replicate what they've seen in the training data. Intelligence is about using your experience to interpret something new. And these algorithms are not doing that. They are just regurgitating what they've seen a lot of in their training data with confidence. And if something hasn't occurred in the training data enough, they give random outputs with confidence. And so we're seeing that if you find out what are the 100 most common uses that people are going to use this for, and you make sure you train them to do really well on those 100 things, for about a year and a half, it'll look like you've got AGI, you've got artificial general intelligence. But as you start using them for more diversified things, or as the world starts subtly changing and drifting away from your training data, you will see them degrade more and more. And that's what we're seeing in the real world. The problem is that we're plugging these things into our bank accounts. We're giving them our passwords and our credentials. We're connecting them to infrastructure in our society. We're making business decisions based on them. I understand that Mark Zuckerberg is using an AI to run his company now as a AI version of himself. And these are disastrous decisions because fundamentally, the only intelligent species in the world is humans. And I will venture to say that God made it that way. And it is Tower of Babel level hubris to think that we can do what God did, even as well as God, if not better. I think that's just a dangerous thing to presume we can do. And I do think we'll be punished for it in a similar manner to what the creators of the Tower of Babel were punished.
So it's the AI hype more than the AI itself. I mean, it's the hype around, again, what you're explaining now is new for me, probably new for most of our audience. The idea that the entire stock market is being driven by AI today.
Yeah, people liken it to the dot-com bubble, but there's a huge difference. In the dot-com bubble, companies went from zero or worth $1 million to being worth $1 billion, and then the collapse brought them back down to earth. We've taken trillion-dollar companies, made them worth $4 trillion, and the harm that will be done to the entire world markets and society when a $4 trillion company becomes a $1 trillion company again will be far more devastating than when a multi-billion dollar company goes back down to being worth close to zero. And the way that I called it a Ponzi scheme, which is probably not an accurate description of it, is that these companies are now, it's not even a hype machine. It's now a self-sustaining existential threat that if any of these companies admit what they know inside them, that this is a false promise, that they are hyping their products beyond at fraudulent levels, if the first one that reveals it will bring them all down. And so none of them can afford to do it. So they keep investing more and more in each other to keep the game going while bringing retail investors along and index funds. And, everyone just goes long whatever's popular. And so it's being brought along by more than just them, but it is based on a lie that they maybe didn't know initially, but they know now. And they're perpetuating it because they need an exit strategy. They need to find a path out of this that doesn't destroy the world economy. And I give them credit at least for caring about that. But it's all built on a very unethical premise that when they realized this wasn't working, they kept building and inflating the bubble more and more. And now when it collapses, it's going to be a real big disaster.
It brings me back to what's called The Big Short. What's the movie called?
Yeah, The Big Short.
I mean, this is like The Big Short on steroids, what you're describing.
But you can't short this because there's so many trillions of dollars behind it that the more you short it, the more they can just add more to the long bet to drive your shorts out and to bankrupt your shorts. I would just not invest in it. I wouldn't take the risk of shorting it because you could be right and with timing be wrong. If it happens a year after you get out of your short and go bankrupt and cover your short position, it doesn't help you that you were right. And I think that, and also I don't see the value in making money off of apocalypse. I think we should just try to educate more and more people about why the business model of AI is just incompatible with just economic science, just the math doesn't math. And if we can just convince people of that, we don't need to make money off of it. We can just build up more and more support for it and eventually pressure these companies to admit defeat and find a way out so we can get back to just living our lives and running our businesses.
So taking this and drilling it down now into Israel. Israel is, in a certain space, in AI space, Israel considers itself to be a leader, whether it's cyber, certainly security. I mean, if we're looking at the current war that we're in, our targets are being selected, according to what they say to be as an AI model. And so I guess it is working in that sphere, but it's not AI. Is that what it is? Or
this is a common misconception that I learned when I was in graduate school. A professor that taught me a lot of what I know about AI told me that it's called AI until it works. Then it's just an algorithm. Google, circa 2010, was one of the best pieces of AI ever written. It's just that people forgot it was AI because they just used it. It was just in the background of their lives.
Just became a search engine.
Yeah. Speech recognition is AI. This artificial general intelligence, or these large language models that are creating fluent chatbots that seem to be thinking on their own, that's what is the bubble. That's what is being sold falsely as something that is intelligent. People, I hear a lot of pitches for startups. That's what I do for a living. And whenever a founder tells me that their product is understanding something or is learning or evolves, I stop them and I say, what do you mean by learning? Because there's mathematical algorithms being computed on a silicon computer, and numbers are being multiplied and added together, and you're getting an output. There's no learning going on there. There's nothing understanding anything. People understand things. Children learn. Adults learn. Computers compute. So you tell me what algorithms are being run and what inputs are being put in and what outputs are coming out. But don't pretend that you're understanding or learning, because that's misapplying terminology. The semantics don't match up with what it's doing. And I think that we have to look at AI. AI targeting is just using data from the past, doing pattern matching, and creating a generative model which predicts something about the future based on the past. We've been doing that in our heads personally for as long as humans have been around. You see an animal and you want to predict whether you should run or fight it. And creating an algorithm that does that is just, it's artificial intelligence. It's a good use of computers. But we have to understand what works. If there's information in your data that can help you reduce uncertainty about the future, that's useful AI. If you're just having something generating random output and it's actually not giving you any kind of predictable, measurable reduction in uncertainty, then that's not useful AI. And I think that the AI that's being sold to us today, probably 5% of the use cases are going to turn out to be valuable. 95% of the products being sold today will probably not exist in 3 years. And whoever adopts them at scale will suffer the consequence of putting something into production that hurts their business, changes their workforce and their workflow, and then having to pay the price of undoing it. So if Israel, one of the criticisms I've heard internally from Israel is Israel feels like we have been slow to adopt AI and they're trying to rapidly catch up. I think the best thing for Israel and for any business is to just wait on the sidelines, maybe experiment with it, learn how other people are using it, off to the side, not in production. And then if I'm wrong and it's incredibly valuable, you can then fast track integrating it. But more and more evidence is showing that I'm right. And the companies and the countries that don't deploy it will come out as the winners.
Wow. So Israel, Israel, I guess it has a very practical, finite application of these models, which is missiles are coming in to kill you. Our system using certain algorithms is saving your life.
Yeah.
What is Israel not doing?
So let me give you two examples. Salesforce. We're very quick to adopt agentic AI, to take large language model based algorithms and start integrating them into Salesforce's core functionality so that customers were experiencing the incredible value of agentic AI. And it was a disaster. And a few months in, with customers complaining how basic things were no longer working, things that were like just solid algorithms that were operating deterministically before suddenly were being randomly broken. And Mark Benioff came out maybe 6 months after deploying agentic AI and said, we're backing off, we're pulling this out, we're returning to deterministic RPA-based algorithms that they were used to be using, and we're going to study how to properly deploy AI, because it didn't work. Another example is Apple.
So Mark had the integrity to do that, and so
Well, he had no choice.
but it's an important message.
But a better example is Apple, because Salesforce, Apple's iPhone, these are things that are used by people every second of every day. If you're reading an article and using AI to summarize it, you do that a couple of times a day. If it's a professional thing, maybe a couple times a week. If you're just using it for your personal enrichment, if it doesn't work well, you can recover. But when Salesforce stopped working, it was a disaster for all the businesses that used it at scale. When Apple tried to introduce generative AI into the Apple Intelligence on the phone, people's hearts are less used in their bodies than phones are used in your daily life. And when the second they deployed Apple Intelligence into Siri onto the phones, people's lives were disrupted. And everyone blamed Apple, saying, how could you be so incompetent? Everyone else is getting AI right. You guys can't get it done. What's wrong with your researchers? It's the wrong analysis. It's because Apple's products are so intrinsic to society that everyone noticed immediately they didn't work. It's because of Apple's success and the broad failure of AI of that kind of AI that made Apple look bad and made Apple Intelligence not work. So I think that what we're seeing in Israel is that there are use cases that work. Israel can only deploy things in the world that work because, unlike America, where nothing really matters, in Israel, everything matters. We have enemies around us who just want to kill us. And if we showed a little weakness on the border of the Gaza envelope, and all of a sudden we were being attacked. And if the world had worked the way they planned it to work, we wouldn't be here anymore. But thank God, Hezbollah forgot to show up, and Judea and Samaria, Palestinians forgot to show up, and the Gaza and Hamas got left holding the bag. But Israel, everything needs to work. We can't have like a month where our equivalent of Salesforce stops working because of agentic AI. We would cease to exist. So Israel can't be an early adopter to AI because everything that Israel does that's important matters in an existential way. And this is where I think that in the business world, in America and the West and Europe, things don't matter as much. And you can play this game and you can pretend that these things are working at some level, and eventually they'll retrench and they'll turn back. Israel has to be really careful about deploying this. I know that they're looking now to deploy AI in education. We've seen how incredibly important the education of our youth is. If we didn't have the brilliant people, the heroes in the IDF, not just being brave and physical and fighting, but using their seichel, using their brilliance and fighting intelligently, we are defeating enemies much seemingly bigger and stronger than us because of how brilliant our soldiers are. If we put our education system at risk by inappropriately deploying non-working AI in our education system, we will not recover from that. And I think that's something that we have to be very careful about, because in Israel, everything matters.
We have the 8200 phenomenon here. Of course, Israel, our largest military unit is 8200, which is the intelligence unit, of course, signal intelligence, which goes on to create many of Israel's top companies, are graduates from 8200. If you were on the educational board of 8200 right now, and we want these people to go on and create a robust economic future for Israel, where would you focus them?
I would focus them on pre-OpenAI machine learning AI algorithms. Before OpenAI launched ChatGPT, we were on a steady trajectory to create incredibly powerful applications of data-driven solutions using machine learning, using transformer models, which are the theoretical basis of large language models. And transformer models were helping us do pattern recognition at a level that was holding us back before that. It was a generational scientific discovery that was ready to change AI and machine learning for the better. And then large language models came out with Shakespearean sonnets and replicating voices of Oprah, and all of a sudden we were distracted by shiny objects and we couldn't think straight again. But I would encourage them really to study transformer models, study the science behind LLMs, And whenever I'm investing in a company that depends on LLMs for their product, I want to make sure that there's a scientist on their team that actually could build a transformer model if they had to. They probably aren't going to because there's enough open source algorithms to use. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. But I'd want, the same way I want a kid to know how to do addition and multiplication before they use a calculator. And I want them to know how to write an essay on paper before they use an AI algorithm to generate one. I want my scientists and my technology teams to understand the inner workings of how AI works and how large language models work before you can deploy them. And then once you understand them, you probably will understand the limitations of them, and you will deploy them in situations where they actually add value, and you will avoid deploying them in situations where they're actually going to seem to be valuable but actually not be.
I hope they're listening, because it sounds like there's a lot at stake here.
For sure.
I want us to go back in time, literally think back historically a little bit. One of the projects you're involved in is the City of David. It's a place that I also spent much of my life. And, you know, Israel, you also mentioned this in your Michael Eisenberg discussion. I've mentioned it many times, where we're the startup nation, and Israel seems to bank everything on being the startup nation today. In fact, our deterrence to the world seems to be the startup nation. But at the end of the day, we're the ancient nation, we're the indigenous nation. And I feel like we're starting to drink the Kool-Aid and kind of forget where this all comes from. What are your thoughts on this, and how has the City of David played a role in your understanding of Israel and where we should be in the history? How our ancient past, our innovative past, back to King David, and our modern day link together? I think very few people make that link.
Yeah, I think that I don't like to think about it as our ancient past, because Torah and the Temple Mount and Jerusalem and the singularity that is the holiest place in the universe is the same today as it was 3,000 years ago. The Akedah and whatever happens in the third Beis Hamikdash are time-bound, but the universality of the Temple Mount is universal and timeless. And I think that when we were struggling and when we were attacked on October 7th, it was a reaction to plead with Hashem and to ask Hashem for salvation and for recovery and for victory over our enemies, because we were kind of caught off guard and behind the eight ball, and we were struggling. I think all the more so, much more important, is that as we've been achieving victory with God's help and all the revealed miracles, all the more so we have to acknowledge the source of our strength, the source of our success. Our success is we do what we need to do with our material efforts, and we study Torah and do mitzvot and say Tehillim and do tefillah. And if we merit it, God gives us success. And I have all the respect in the world for our soldiers. They're heroes to me. Everyone, I would buy any soldier that came up to me a lunch anytime he wants. Your audience can take me up on that. But they have to understand that, and I think they do, that they experience revealed miracles in every day in their battles, and that's from Hashem. And if we don't acknowledge the importance of the Temple Mount and the importance of Jerusalem and the holiness of our yearning for the third temple and for Mashiach, then we're missing the point. Hashem is doing this for us not because he likes our startups, not because he likes our Nobel Prizes. Those are all the material, the gashmias of our success. And that's part of, God powers us to do good and evil. Our godly soul powers, our klipas power the bad of what we do. And it's a superpower, but we're supposed to strive for good because we're godly, and we need to show God that we understand that it comes from him. And even going back to, as much as I'm huge proponent of the work being done in the City of David, restoring the grandeur of the pilgrimage road from the Shiloach Pool to the Temple Mount, to recreate what our people did for hundreds of years when the temples were there. But even going back to the true source of our covenant, and that's in Hebron and the Machpelah, that we merit God's miracles partly because we do good things, because we keep Torah, because we acknowledge Hashem. But ultimately, everything we have is because God made a deal, and God is honorable. God made a promise to Avram Avinu and the Avos Neimahos that he was going to do all the things he's doing for us. And he doesn't lie. He doesn't renege on a deal. He pays his bills. And we merit what we have because of the merit of the Avos and the Imahos. And we need to show, not only do we need to show that we care about the Temple Mount and the home of the Beis HaMikdash and the home of our spirituality, we also need to acknowledge that all of this is due to the covenant with Abraham and to respect the burial place of the Avos and the Imahos, respect Hebron, and respect Judea, the heartland of the country, and make sure that we show as much care for the true startup nation, which is Abraham's home, and as much as we and more than we care about the startup nation in Tel Aviv and Herzliya and on the west coast of Israel.
The Abraham Accords, as you're speaking, I'm envisioning a representative going to the Abraham Accords discussion with our other Abrahamic, cousins out there, and having a discussion that has nothing to do with what you're saying. And it seems to me to be a total loss, meaning he's going to say that we have great defense technology we're willing to share, that we have, intelligence throughout the Middle East. But what you're really saying is we are the ones that are supposed to be bringing this idea of a divine mission into our daily activities. And that is our representative, that is our representation to the Abraham Accords.
Yes and no. If any of the leaders of Syria or Hamas or Iran or Hezbollah were still alive, they would acknowledge what the leaders in the Arab world do acknowledge, the ones that are alive acknowledge, is that he who curses us is cursed. He who blesses us is blessed, but it's turned into he who blesses us is blessed with prosperity. He who curses us is dead. Mm-hmm. And so we might be mistakenly promoting the Abraham Accords in the past on technology and material prosperity. But I think the future of the Abraham Accords is going to be on the desire of the leaders of these countries to actually stay alive and continue to be the leaders of those countries. And they will get the benefit of the prosperity because he who blesses us is blessed. But I think we've shown that if you cross us and you don't apologize for it, you don't stay alive, much less in charge of your country for much longer. And it's a shame that we don't say it. We should own what God has blessed us with, that we seem to feel like we need to apologize for ourselves and justify our existence through our technology and our startups and our $30 billion exits. And those are good things, but they're not the why of us. We're not Startup Nation. We're Eretz Israel. We're the land of the Torah. We're the land Yehoshua conquered. And we are in the process of conquering it again. And we should own that legacy and own that future.
David, I feel like these words are so truthful. I actually am going to say publicly that I feel like to go much farther beyond them is going to be a waste. I want our audience to replay those last 2 minutes of what you said. I feel it is a sense of mission that I've not had on this podcast before, and it's absolute clarity. And I don't know what God said to you exactly when you were standing on the Mount of Olives, but he took this young man who was not brought up in a religious family and imbued you with a sense of truth that is simply, it's enlightening in the true sense. I feel like even for me just sitting here, there's a level of haze. Even myself, who often goes on the news and is defending Israel and trying not to apologize, but it is lacking this kind of basic truth that you're saying. And I want to thank you for bringing it here to the True East podcast. I feel like this is now True East. And
can I tell you that as much as, the Hashem speaking to me when I was a youth was very important to me, the learning I've done by studying the Tanya and studying Chassidus, not from a Chabad.
What the Tanya is, by the way, for our listeners.
So the Tanya is the Alter Rebbe's depiction or the presentation of Chassidic teachings, ancient from the Zohar, the Jewish mysticism, presenting it to the masses against a lot of public opinion at the time when he did it. But to me, it is the metaphysics. It's the science of the spiritual world. We are not capable of truly understanding it, only through metaphor. But the Hasidic teachings that's embedded in the Tanya, that's elaborated in the Tanya, helps me as a scientist understand how to imagine the spiritual world that I can't perceive. It's kind of like Jim Simons, the founder of Renaissance, was a computational geometrist. He understood 16-dimensional spaces, the math of 16-dimensional spaces. We live in 4 dimensions, and the spiritual world, the world of kashrut, the world of mitzvot, the world of klipas, the world of spirituality, is in another dimension that we don't have senses for. And the Torah explains to us the material. It's the user manual for how to manage the world, where we're blind to the holes we can fall into if we step into them. So the Torah tells us how to avoid the spiritual harm that we can't perceive if we get it. And the Tanya explains the metaphysics behind it. It lays out metaphors for how our godly soul and our animal soul are in constant battle, and how we are really, this whole world is just God. If you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, the end of the first movie, when Neo starts seeing the fabric of the bits and bytes of the virtual world he's living in, that is in fact what we're living in. Our physical world, which is very real, and Hashem wants us to experience it in a very real way, is just that we are, the four-dimensional space of this universe is just bits and bytes to Hashem in a metaphorical way. And we are both, Jews are both living in that physical world, but according to the Tanya, we're also a part of the fabric of that virtual world, and we are responsible for making that system work. And the Torah and the oral tradition and the mystical teachings are all the elements that teach us how to do it responsibly. And when I started my third time now through the Tanya, as I've started to see and understand the implications of that, the metaphysics, the metascience of the spiritual world, I realized that my job here, as much as I'm here to enjoy, watch good TV shows and enjoy good wine and all these things that I'm doing in the mundane world, I am supposed to do something for Hashem. Hashem puts me here for a reason. And if my algorithms fitting into that matrix can do the things I'm supposed to do, I will be rewarded with longevity, with health, with productivity, and my children will benefit. I'll be a part of the story the way Queen Esther was the part of her story, because she agreed to take risks and approach Achashverosh. If I do my part, then I will be rewarded for it. If I don't, I'll just die, spiritually or physically, and be irrelevant. And so I think that what I've learned from the Tanya is that my job is to, as quickly as possible and as completely as possible, figure out what God's purpose is for me and for your audience and for everyone, Jews and non-Jews. We're all here for a purpose. And we have to seek that out, figure out our purpose, and try as much as we can to be a part of God's outcome for us, so we can achieve a redemption, we can welcome Mashiach, we can get the third temple, and we can usher in the new age of the world to come. But we have to do the work. And the work comes from not deciding what we think the Torah means and what we want Judaism to be. We have to figure out what God tells us the Torah is and what our purpose is in this world.
David, it's simply incredible. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.